we are super excited to have you all here today for this web conference. Mo, I am going to let you do our fun funding discussion.
Okay, so I want to let you all know that this publication was supported by the grant or cooperative agreement funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and its contents are solely the responsibility of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official views of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention or the Department of Health and Human Services. You're here for the very last workshop in our series. This is workshop 6. We're wrapping it up. Where do we go from here to prevent sexual violence during COVID-19? It's a question we've all been asking ourselves, right?
Definitely. It has been the question of the last 18 months for sure. We have a handful of objectives for you all today. We just want you to be aware of them. To describe key takeaways from the web conference series that Moa just mentioned. Also, we recognize, that while this is the last web conference in this series specific to preventing sexual violence during COVID-19, neither the pandemic nor sexual violence has ended since we started this series. So we want folks to be able to identify strategies to sustain and adapt sexual violence prevention efforts during this continual and prolonged crisis. And then we also want folks to be able to think about additional opportunities for connection and learning during the pandemic beyond this web conference series. So to start, we know that a lot of folks are returning. This may not be their first time on one of these web conferences. What has been your biggest takeaway or lesson learned about preventing sexual violence during the COVID-19 pandemic? And we just ask that you use the text chat to respond to this question. It's been a hard time, but I have been really inspired by the resiliency and the flexibility of our prevention community and just the incredible things that the incredible healing, the incredible prevention work that has come out of this PreventConnect community and beyond. So thank you, Nicole. I see Nicole says always check in with a client, no matter how small something may seem. I think that's come up a lot in our prevention spaces too. There's been a lot of conversations about just being able to connect with one another as sexual violence prevention in and of itself. And that, when folks are coming to prevention spaces, they're bringing a lot with them that may have been bringing more with them than they have in the past. Janet says we must take care of ourselves and be a team effort. Janet, that is wonderful and so true. Thank you so much for that response. I'm going to let folks take a little bit more time to respond to that. Enrica, oh my gosh, we need to meet communities where they are and thinking about our prevention programming. Yes, absolutely. I think that's been a huge lesson learned or key takeaway from doing the work in this time. Thank you for that response. We'll come back to some of the responses as they come in too. So, as Mo said, we have, a lot of thoughts and feelings about the timing of this being the final one in our series and kind of, and Mo, feel free to come in here. We had started our first web conference in this series in December of 2020. And I remember when we were planning, we were thinking, oh, by the time that we get to September 2021, we'll be in a very different place than we were in December. And, maybe it'll be something where folks are able to be in person together at full capacity again. And so I think we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that we all have different expectations and different experiences in this last 18 months. But we've also persevered through a lot. And while this series concludes today in the iteration that it's currently in, there is still a lot of incredible work being done by you all on this call today. And we just wanted to have this space today to talk about how do we sustain ourselves our work and our communities moving forward. Mo, did you have any thoughts you want to add?
I really like the way that you're saying this, Tori, because I definitely have so many feelings about this, um, about the bittersweetness of this ending and also being in a really different space than I thought we would be. But I feel like we have a lot of history that we can learn from and folks that we can kind of build strength from and be like, yeah, we can still get through this. And we are really resilient, like you were saying, and can still do wonderful, great things while everything is maybe not so great around us. And I just feel very thankful for the folks who are here today to be sharing with us that to help really wrap this up in a way that feels like, okay, we can take these lessons. We can kind of revisit where we are in our bodies and in ourselves to kind of help us get through whatever is coming next.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am so excited to get to our guests today. Some of our guests may be familiar faces for folks. And the reason why is that we had a great opportunity to invite back guests who had appeared earlier on this series. So we wanted to kind of take a temperature check and see, who in the audience right now has been a part of these other web conferences that we've had in the last year. Who else has been a part of this series? We also have some new guests joining us today, and we are so excited that they're bringing a wonderful gift for you all today too. But we want to know what other web conferences in this series have you been on? And I see almost half of folks, this is your first one. Welcome. Like we're glad that we got you here for this one. And I think this is going to be a really special one. And it's also a chance for us to kind of recap and pick up where we left off with some of our earlier guests too.
Mhm.
So this is great. Yeah, it looks like a lot of folks, we're getting people like selecting multiple options, like they've been on more than one. So I think that's really cool to see those responses coming in.
And I shared a link in the text chat where if you are looking at this list and realizing, like, wait, I missed a few of these or I missed all of them so far, you can go back and view the recordings. At this link, it'll take you to a page on the NSVRC webpage, but you can look at all of the different web conferences that we've had, and we'll have the recording of this up on there as well. So you haven't really missed it. That's one of the beauties of technology, right?
Right. Yeah. As much as it likes to throw us curveballs, it still gives us an opportunity to really be together. And you'd think that by number 6 we'd have all of our Zoom weirdness worked out, but it's doing something different today. So here we go. We are back. So, thank you to our newcomers. Thank you to our returners. We're going to do things a little bit differently than we have before in this series for our web conference today. So the focus is, how do we continue doing this work while we are still in this prolonged pandemic and crisis? And I know there are people in the audience who are very familiar with the social ecological model. Some people in our audience may or may not have tattoos or home art or wallpaper of the social ecological model. So we know that folks are probably very familiar with this. We kind of structured our web conference similarly. Our first guest you're going to hear from is going to talk about how do we sustain this work within ourselves. Our second guest will discuss how we sustain this work in our relationships with one another and our partnerships with one another. And finally, the last guest that you'll hear from today will discuss how we sustain this work within our communities and within our community level prevention work. So really excited to have you all here today and to introduce our first guest. So Janae Johnson is a movement builder, program innovation leader in public health and thought leader. And Janae is bringing a wonderful gift of mindfulness and who we need to be in order to be in right relationship with each other to this web conference today. Janae, thank you so much. I am so excited to learn from you.
Good morning, Tori, and good morning, everyone. I am here with you, sitting in my little home office in Oakland, California. Often by day, I am the program innovation leader, mindfulness, trauma, racial healing for the San Francisco Department of Public Health. The San Francisco Department of Public Health is the only public health jurisdiction in the country that has dedicated itself to a trauma-informed systems initiative, an initiative to help us move from being trauma-inducing to trauma-informed and ultimately healing. And what I have brought to the conversation is mindfulness, is that we cannot do the deep work of being healing, being reflective and responsive if we are constantly reactive. So we can have these great trauma principles and yet not make the mark. So what we are really endeavoring to do is to nest our trauma work in a mindful presence. And so we are the only public health organization who is really bringing mindfulness into the infrastructure to support the healing of our staff and employees. Take a breath. And I'm going to invite you to take a breath with me. Deep breath in and audible exhale out. Sexual violence is trauma. And I loved hearing about what you all have been doing over this year and a half, responding in the midst of COVID-19, because the ultimate healing balm of trauma is connection. And so it's inside of that connection that we co-regulate and meet and generate compassion and kindness and resilience and the things that we need in order to not forget, but to be able to live well in the aftermath. So first slide, please. So I'm going to invite you today to come home to your own heart, to be in your body, as I move through some suggestions for and keys to growing and cultivating liberated relationships. And that truly comes out of having a deeper quality of presence. And presence is not something that is out there. Doing this work, I started out in maternal child adolescent health. I directed a maternal health program for Black women for 15 years. And often our staff was so out there for our clients. But what I want to invite you to is to come home to yourself, because you cannot give what you do not have. And we do not want to, inside of our organizations and inside of our relationships, emulate the patterns that show up inside of institutions and organizations that actually are structurally adverse. So come home to your own heart. Let's start with a simple heart-focused breathing. This is from the heart math technology. The heart has its own brain. So I'm going to ask you to sit in an upright but relaxed position. Kind of look around, find your way. Upright but relaxed. I'm going to ask you to drop your gaze or close your eyes. And I'm going to close this door of my office because I hear dishes going on. Beautiful, finding yourself in an upright but relaxed position, dropping your gaze, closing your eyes. I'd like you to roll your shoulders back, taking in a deep breath and finding your breath. Coming home to the heart. This is called heart-focused breathing. And just follow my directions. Make it easy. Resist the temptation to resist. Come home to yourself for a moment. Give yourself a moment of replenishment. I'd like you to breathe slowly and deeply through the heart or chest area. This kind of breath tampons down the volume on depleting emotions. Slow and deep through the heart space. Giving yourself a moment to arrive. Coming home to your own body, coming home to your heart. Beautiful. Lifting your gaze, opening your eyes. That was heart-focused breathing. Please take that away with you. It's a simple moment of breathing through the heart or chest area, slow and deep. And it quiets depleting emotions. And when we're in the midst of our work, in the midst of our lives, in the midst of the chaos and distractions that the external world is constantly generating, you want to have access for ways to stay with yourself and not be hijacked. Yes, yes. And heart-focused breathing is a wonderful practice. The heart math technology recommends that you do it for 10 minutes, 3 times a day. Set a timer and just enjoy. Next slide, please. I love myself. The quietest, simplest, most powerful revolution ever. Self-love is your greatest protection. Once again, if we are to cultivate relationships that are liberated, relationships with each member of the community or each individual is sovereign, it takes a level of self-love and self-care. Self-love is your greatest protection. And I love this beautiful slide. It's quiet, it's simple, and it is powerful. It is the thing that has us set healthy and proper boundaries. It is the thing that keeps us having access to the fullness of our voice. It is the thing that tells us when to stop. Not only take a breath, but take a nap. Get a drink of water. Or say that beautiful, wonderful word, no. Next slide, please. Often in this work, when we come to this work, we're dealing with problems, we're dealing with structural adversity, we're looking at pain, we are tempted actually to make shrines to pain. And we can forget actually that we have been brought here to flourish, to fully expand into the fullness of the possibility and the potential of who we are. You are here to flourish. And I would guess that you have chosen this work because you are committed to others flourishing too. But remember, you cannot give what you do not have. You cannot give what you have not nurtured in yourself. Next slide, please. So that brings me to mindfulness. What is that? And many of you may already have a mindful practice, a quiet sitting, a meditation practice, a walking meditation practice. There's a lot of different ways to come to mindfulness. But mindfulness is being present to what is. It's paying attention on purpose. Mindfulness of mind, body, and surroundings, and being able to hold that with an attitude of kindness and curiosity. Kindness, non-judgmental, curiosity, being able to have enough access to oneself to be reflective and contemplative and investigate, what is that? What am I finding here? Where did that come from? Very important because, as I said, we are in a world and in a time that is very chaotic. There's a term called VUCA, V-U-C-A. It means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And in those times, it is very distracting. It is very easy to be outside of yourself all day, every day. But what we know about mindfulness is that when we have these practices that bring us home to ourselves, that help us drop in to see what is there and then to pay attention to it and to attend to it and to nurture it and cultivate it and to move things out that don't belong there and to develop, some new neural pathways, because it's what we do with consistency that will create the experience that we want to have in life, or that we do have if we're living on autopilot. Next slide, please. I love this quote by John Kabat-Zinn. He says, ultimately, I see mindfulness as a love affair with life, with reality and imagination, with the beauty of our own being, with your heart, body, and mind, and this world. It is a love affair once again with yourself because it starts with you. Dropping the gaze, closing the eyes, dropping activity, finding the breath, and seeing what is there. And we will practice again before I let you go. Next slide, please. Because what a mindful practice opens up for you is this beautiful thing called calm, clarity, and dare I say happiness. I have my snow globe here, and this is often how we live life, right? All shook up. Stuff is going round and round all the time. But if I just stop and hold the globe and hold it still, a settling happens. And inside of the settling, then I have clear-sightedness. I can see clearly through. What is happening inside of the VUCA world, inside of the VUCA grind culture, is that we are hijacked. We are constantly scanning for safety, and we are constantly, our emotions are triggered and are highly sensitive, and we're hijacked. And we're missing these opportunities for calm, clarity, happiness, access into our intuition and imagination. And I must say, to do this work, we have got to be imaginative and creative and find calm, not to tamp down and never connect with the more potent emotions, but it's not to have those emotions run us. Is to be able to take the data from them, the information that they're giving us, but to still live from a place of equanimity, which means there is rootedness, that we can come back to center. And just as there is a ton of documentation of intergenerational trauma, there is also a ton of documentation on intergenerational resilience. And so in my work, that's more of what I'm moving towards. Because it's what we think, do, and pay attention to with consistency. That is what builds the neural pathways in our brain, and that is what impacts our nervous system, and that is what the experience of life is generated from. What are you doing? What are you thinking about with consistency? Where is your attention going day after day? What are you ruminating about? So let's do a little focused attention exercise together. Next slide, please. This is the basics of a basic at-home meditation practice. We started out with the heart-focused breathing, and that's exactly where we start again, dropping the gaze, closing the eyes, sitting in an upright position. Hands gently on your lap in the here and now. Mind you that you can do this focusing attention while you're washing dishes, washing your hands, walking, but we're going to do it as a sitting together. Why you want to develop this muscle of focusing your attention so that when you're in your real life, and it's all your real life, but when you're in your life that is full of activity, you have this neural pathway called, I know how to come to center. I know how to bring myself back. So let's do this together. Focused attention. Dropping the gaze, closing the eyes, finding your breath, resisting resistance, saying, no, this is what we're doing right now. Letting the sound of the bell just clear the air. Finding your breath in this moment. Connecting to the inhale and the exhale. Meeting your breath like a good friend. And focusing your attention on your breath, the friend that you're meeting. If thoughts arise, that is so normal, and thoughts are sticky, they just want to hang out. And you're just going to say, thank you. Breathing now. And coming back to the breath. Staying with the breath. Staying with yourself if you feel so moved. Putting your hand on your chest and meeting yourself with kindness. Meet yourself right now with kindness and with curiosity. Meet yourself with, I am here. I got through enough to be here in this moment. Staying your mind and your attention. Make it easy. Beautiful. Taking in a deep breath, audible exhale out. Next slide, please. One of the reasons why this mindfulness thing, this quiet sitting, this meditation is so important. It's important because it helps us to build the muscle of focusing our attention, which is very important in the work that you do, the work that I do, the life that we have and are living. But it also is a runway into emotional intelligence. These are the essential human competencies such as self-awareness, self-control, and empathy, and the arts of listening, resolving conflicts, and cooperation. This is out of the work of Daniel Goleman, his groundbreaking book, Emotional Intelligence. And so when we teach mindfulness, we teach it as a runway into these important competencies. And these are the things that we must have in and nurture in ourselves consistently so that we can truly make a difference, so that we can tap our intuition and our imagination, and so that we can bring us some sense and calm and fierceness, yes, and potency to whatever it is that we're doing that is truly not diffused and all over the place and reactive, but it's on purpose. Next slide, please. So just as I gave you the heart-focused breathing as a simple on-the-go practice, here's another on-the-go practice. It's called integrated practice. It's 3 breaths. Your first breath is, you bring attention to the breath. The second breath is you relax the body. The third breath, you ask the question, what's important now? This is a wonderful practice in the midst of a day that kind of feels overwhelming, or you just kind of lost your way, or your to-do list is just, as we say in Oakland, hella long, and you need a way through. What the breath does, the breath helps to metabolize stress in the body. And it's going to give you a little more space. So attention to the breath. You can do it with me right now. Relax the body. And ask yourself the question, what's important now? And what you're after here is the next best thing, not the next 50 things, but just the next thing. Go to the bathroom, call my mom, send that email, get outside, pet my dog. It could be any number of things. Is the next appropriate and best action that is going to contribute to your flourishing. Because remember, that's why you're here. Next slide, please. Another integrated practice I want to give you is the STOP, S-T-O-P. So in the midst of VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, stop. Take a breath. Observe. Remember, mindfulness is being present to mind, body, and surroundings. What's happening in my body? The experience of trauma, as you know, it's in the body. It's not out there. It's the event that we experience with a sense of helplessness that generates fight, flight, freeze, appease, dissociate. So we want to stop, take a breath, and give ourselves the space. One of my wonderful mindfulness teachers in the Department of Public Health, we just trained 15 people. So proud of that. He says, take 2 steps back. Take 2 steps back and observe what's going on. What just happened to me? What is happening here? And then give yourself that moment before you proceed mindfully. And the other P that I like to bring to your attention is stop, take a breath, observe, and pray. If you have a spiritual practice of some sort, access that. Mindfulness invites it all in. It's every good thing that is available to you. Use it. Next slide, please. So there are 2 really important practices for your journey: loving kindness and self-compassion. And I started this at the beginning with self-love is your greatest protection, and being kind to yourself. We can be very kind to other people, but the inner critic, it can be so mean. Forgive yourself, be gentle with yourself, and be kind to yourself. I'm going to give you a few words of loving kindness, and I'm going to ask you to just let these words wash over you and replenish you and refresh you right in this moment. You can close your eyes, drop your gaze, and just listen. May peace and love wash over you, replenishing, refreshing, and nourishing your soul. May you be safe and protected. May you be well. May you love and be loved. May you be at peace. And may you be free. You are here to flourish, and in that flourishing, requires that you are liberated and that you are free. To have liberated, free relationships where there are healthy boundaries, where there's admiration and respect, where there is love. We don't say enough about that. One must come home to oneself so that you bring a quality of presence to the relationship, so that when there is conflict and complexity, you have the rootedness and centeredness to hold the difficulty. Because relationships are not easy, but they are the pot, the flower pot, if you will, that we get seated together, where we get to grow. But first, come to the relationship with presence. Come to the relationship having taken care of yourself, giving yourself time and attention. And I assert that that does indeed start with the breath. Loving kindness, this is metta meditation. You can look that up on any number of places. There's beautiful metta meditations. The beautiful Sharon Salzberg brought that meditation back from the East to the West. So you can look up some of her work. Self-compassion meditation are beautiful. And I'm also going to recommend a book to you. I know you got all the books. I know you're reading Pleasure Activism, our beautiful Adrienne Marie Brown. I know you're reading Emergent Strategy, all the good things. And I'm going to recommend Just One Thing. You might not be able to see it. This is Just One Thing. This is by Rick Hansen, PhD. Beautiful, simple, day-to-day practices on taking care of yourself. Yes, yes. Because, and he explains the neuroscience so beautifully, the brain cleaves to negativity like Velcro, and positives roll off like Teflon, because the brain has a natural negativity bias. So in order for us to really emerge with the tools to flourish, we have got to immerse ourselves. Immerse yourself, like go deep in the water into the positives. It is not bypassing, baby. It is learning how to live at the upper levels of the emotional guidance scale, where there is freedom and love and joy and appreciation. And that's where the miraculous happens. That's where miracles happen. That's where manifestation happens. That's where we activate the greatness of our potential and possibility. You've got to be happy. You've got to be happy, even in the face of the challenge. Next slide, please. Without inner change, there can be no outer change. Without collective change, no change matters. The gorgeous Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, Zen Buddhist monk. I'm so thankful I get to see her from time to time because she's here in California. So the change that we want to see out there starts in here. And there can be no change out there until we do it inside. My program is called The Right Within Experience, taken from that beautiful lyric from, oh my God, I just lost her name, but you know who I'm talking about, from the Fugees. How you gonna win when you ain't right within? Lauryn Hill. And unless the change is collective, then, as we know, we have evolved from civil rights to social justice, from looking at the dismantling of the institutionalized oppression that happens on so many levels. And that's what you're a part of. That's what you've been called to. You're born in a time when you get to participate in that and make a contribution to that. Wow. I bow. Yes. And to do that, you got to take care of yourself. You've got to honor and attend and love yourself. Next slide, please. You're not obligated to win. You're obligated to keep trying to do the best you can do every day. From our elder, Marion Wright Edelman, the founder of the Children's Defense Fund. The winning is over a long period of time. We've been handed a baton. It's our turn to do our work so that we can hand the next group their assignment. It's our role to pay attention, to be awake, to be aware, to self-manage, to have empathy, to have deep listening skills, to be able to resolve conflicts and cooperate. That's what we're up here to do. And to do all of that while we're fly and flourishing. So last slide, please. So that's what I want to leave you with today. I want to leave you with an invitation to your own heart, an invitation to presence, an invitation as we move into the weekend. I'd like each of you to commit to an activity that will replenish your soul this weekend. Nap, swim, walk, connect with people who love you, laugh, glass of sangria, whatever. I want you to commit to something that is going to have you flourish and have you attend to yourself. I've been Marie Kondo in, honey. Oh my Lord. So that's part of what I'm gonna do. The pile of clothes my husband had out in the living room, I could not believe it, but we're doing that. Whatever is going to bring you home to yourself and give you the loving, kind attention that you should have and deserve and are worthy of. So that's the word from Janae today, mindful movement builder, public health professional, thought leader, and founder of the Right Within Experience. I love y'all. Be bright and beautiful. Keep it real.
Janae, thank you. So I have my camera off. I'm a little weepy right now.
It's all good.
This was absolutely beautiful. And yes, what Ashley said, soul filling. And your last comment of what is something you are going to do this weekend to fill your soul really goes into our question for the audience as we transition into our next set of guests. How can you sustain yourself to continue preventing sexual violence during the COVID-19 pandemic? We invited Janae to be part of this web conference today because we recognize it's been a hard year, it's been a hard lifetime, a hard history. And while we can't solve everything that contributes to folks' burnout, what we wanted to do was bring Janae and her gift here for you all today to bring love back into prevention and really center that within ourselves and feel value in how we move forward with ourselves and with our work. So we thank you so much, Janae, and I'm gonna listen to your recording like at the start of every day now.
Thank you. It was my
super
pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you.
I'm heading out. Peace and love, everyone. Be well and take good care. Thank you for this opportunity to encourage you. Please be encouraged.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to continue this conversation of encouragement and feeling centered within ourselves and our relationships, I am really excited to introduce our next set of guests. We have Shireen Elnaga and Montia Daniels. Both of them are from UNC Chapel Hill. Both of them may be familiar faces because they were on our first web conference in this series about creating emergent spaces. Towards the end of their conversation, you're also going to hear some virtual remarks that Chris Croft provided for us. But Montia and Shireen, thank you so much, and take it away.
Hey y'all, thank you so much for having us again. I'll introduce myself again. My name is Montia Daniels. My pronouns are she, her. I go to UNC Chapel Hill, major in Women's and Gender Studies and Media and Journalism. And right now I'm the campus-wide co-president.
Hi folks, thank you again so much for having us. We're really excited to be back. My name is Shireen Naga. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm currently an MSW student at UNC Chapel Hill.
Yeah, great. And you'll be hearing from Chris later.
So we just want to introduce our work by introducing emergent strategy, which is where we found a lot of inspiration that Adrienne Maree Brown took and created this framework, which is in her book, Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds. And so Adrienne Maree Brown also got a lot of inspiration and teachings from Octavia Butler, who we're also going to be talking about later in this presentation, but just wanting to give credit where credit is due in terms of her inspiring our passions and our work in emergent spaces and thinking about how we can apply this framework to the spaces that we're in on a day-to-day basis.
So sorry, and the principles of emergent strategy is that it has a fractal nature, acknowledging the relationship between small and large. It's adaptive. It emphasizes interdependence and decentralization. It's nonlinear and iterative. It fosters resilience and opportunities for transformative justice. And what we'll be expanding more on today is how it continues to create more possibilities. These are all of the ways that Adrienne Maree Brown set out the ways to practice emergent strategies, and we wanted to show you the ways that you can practice them here.
Thank you so much, Montia. So as Montia mentioned, we are focusing today on the element of continuing to create more possibilities. And so even just in the way that we created this framework, we build it upon the framework that Adrienne Maree Brown was already thinking about, just like Adrienne Maree Brown took frameworks and ideas that she took from Octavia Butler's work. So thinking about building upon each other's work, thinking about expanding in different ways to create possibilities that we've never seen before. And this is especially important to think about as we are all navigating and adapting constantly to this ever-changing environment that COVID-19 has brought us, and also just with all of the structural violence and oppression that we see in the world and that we've seen historically, navigating that and thinking of how we can create better alternatives and better possibilities to what we see now.
Next, thank you. And now we wanted to talk a lot about Octavia Butler and the way that she has had such a community impact on us. Octavia Butler started with her own individual journey and has created a multiple forms of impact on different communities, herself, her relationships, and society as a whole. Oftentimes we start with ourselves and our beliefs, our ideals, our dreams, and we can also create a positive community impact by sharing our works, our dreams, and our ideals. So where the community fits into reimagination. Community often doesn't start with you. It often starts with all the people that have come before you. Approaching community from a historical communal view instead of an individualistic view is what allows us to see that all of these different types of isms and forms of violence are connected. Today, we're talking a lot about capitalism, environmentalism, and violence and white supremacy intersecting that create the ideology of wanting to have individual over community. We really believe that community is what makes us, and community is what allows us to push forward. And so recognizing that oppression works to divide, not unify on multiple levels and our systems, gives us that knowledge that we need to push forward, and understanding that if we don't work together, we often are able to reach our goals. And often, if we put ourselves over all of the things that come over, all of the things in our community, we value individual over community, we're often doing ourselves a disjustice and working against the oppressions that we want to, that we eventually want to be able to seek on. these oppressions are working to divide us. So unifying is an act of social justice in itself. Also, we wanted to talk about community building. Community building starts with trust and is maintained with love. Building trust by making oneself trustworthy is especially the way that we want to go about this, especially for folks who hold identities of privilege. Oftentimes when we have conversations of accountability, when we have conversations of forgiveness, we often expect the communities that have been harmed to be able to hold that space for accountability, also facilitate that space of accountability, and then regain trust and show trust again, and also forgive. I think that's putting a bit too much on the communities that are harmed. And so we want to hold space for accountabilities and ways that can to imagine that accountability as we reimagine like the future systems that we want to be a part of.
Thanks so much, Montia. So in thinking about community and thinking about working with folks, and also, again, just thinking about the ever-changing environments that we're all having to navigate and adapt to, we're going to be uncomfortable. That's going to be something that comes up for us often, likely, especially as we're dealing with systems that were never created for folks in the first place. So thinking about that discomfort and how we hold that discomfort is really important, because it's not necessarily being discomfort or having that discomfort that's a bad thing. A lot of the time, having discomfort can be a signal and a learning tool to us that we can expand or grow in a different kind of way. But that really depends on how we hold and create space for that discomfort. So this is kind of where emergent strategy, emergent spaces comes in, and how we hold discomfort, not only within ourselves, but with other folks on a group level, on a community level, on a societal level. Might we even dare to go that far, right? So thinking about discomfort and taking active steps to grow from it is super important. So again, just thinking about emergent spaces specifically for holding productive conversations and addressing conflict when discomfort arises, particularly when we're in group settings. So something with this to think about is just the idea of counterproductive conflict versus productive conflict, which is something that we explore more in depth in emergent spaces. And so thinking about how productive conflict can look more like actually prioritizing all folks in the space, especially thinking about centering marginalized folks' experiences, but also not putting it on folks to do that emotional labor that Montia was talking about. Thinking also about how counterproductive spaces, so spaces that are harmful or don't hold discomfort well, are a lot of time based on ego, based on individualism, whether that's an individual themselves or an individual organization who's trying to one up another organization or be the sole or individual organization that's doing a specific kind of work, rather than focusing on the value of collaboration and community. So just thinking about that, and of course we again have COVID-19 happening now, and it's been happening for a while. That's forced us to adapt to a lot of discomfort. So in a way, we have lots of opportunities to hold and sit with our discomfort in a way that can be meaningful and that can produce growth. Also on that note, thinking about taking action and stepping out of that discomfort can really begin when we start to reimagine and critically engage with everything that's around us. And when I say everything, I mean everything, from our workspaces to the relationships we have with folks, to the literal items that we encounter or environments that we encounter on a daily basis, from bathrooms to instruments we play, because I tell you, a lot of those things, again, just like other things, were not meant for every kind of person. They were usually meant for one kind of person. So critically engaging with that fact and understand how we're navigating that on a daily basis can start to bring us more awareness and consciousness and mindfulness, like Shanae was talking about earlier, which is so important. But that requires a level of internal engagement with the external world around us. And again, that often brings up discomfort, which again is something that we can sit with, but also grow from. So again, thinking of how we interact with systems and remembering that these systems are not accidental in the way that they oppress, and in fact, they're very purposeful in the way they oppress, like Montia was saying earlier, specifically in the way they divide us. So thinking about racism, sexism, capitalism, and how they oppress us and all the folks around us as well. And also thinking about and being conscious about how we ourselves are socialized in ways that prevent us from actively challenging norms and creating better possibilities. Oftentimes we'll see in organizations or other formalized institutions that, you know, challenging norms might come with punitive responses, or you know, you're de-incentivized sometimes to challenge. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing that or doing that work, because where that challenge comes is where there's opportunity for us to really create better alternatives for ourselves and also for the folks that we're working with. And then lastly, just thinking again about how your own personal internal work to reimagine our world and our systems can manifest externally. And I think sometimes harm happens because folks are so ready to think about reimagining the work and thinking about all the external work and all the external systems that we're having to navigate without doing that first initial step of internal self-reflection and that reflexivity part of, where do I fit into all of this? So thinking about that internal work constantly and consciously before and as we are engaging in this kind of work.
So lastly, we wanted to hold space for this quote from Alexis Pauline Gumbs. If we stay in love with our own freedom, we make refuge for each other. How do we do it? With our movement, with our braveness, with our leaving, with our words, almost always with food involved. And so Alexis Pauline Gumbs was talking about this quote, especially in relation to the way that we think of our own freedom. I really like the first part of, we stay in love with our own freedom. I think I'm still falling in love with the idea of being free and freeing myself from all the internal work that I need to do to unlearn oppression, to unlearn all of the isms that I know. And I think that that is valuable in itself. Nextly, I also wanted to meditate on the fact that we make refuge for each other. I think that social justice is a community thing. It's really hard to do social justice in isolation, as we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic. It's really hard when we can't get together. Also the COVID-19 pandemic has showed us the way that placing individual over community can cause a lot of harm. And so when we make refuge for each other, when we hold each other in community instead of in isolation, when we hold ourselves accountable in a community instead of making ourselves our own individual, it makes us our social justice, it makes our impact so much greater than what it could have been. And even away from a strategic view, it feels great for me, at least, to be in community. I was raised by community, I'm loved by community, and community is what fuels my everyday life. And so we do it in a lot of different ways. We do it with our movement, our braveness, our leaving, our words, almost always with food involved. So I think the way that we are always continually transforming and doing this work is with our fierceness, like Janae was saying, is with our leaving the things that don't serve us, is with our words of encouragement, our words of empowerment, and hopefully for y'all too, with food involved. Food is always what gets community together for me. So I hope that that is the same for you. So I just wanted to say thank y'all so much for listening to us, for having this experience with us. We're going to lead into some words with Chris now, but I would like for you to meditate on this quote and to think about it and to see how you can also stay in love with your own freedom, how you can also find refuge for each other in community.
Hi, this is Chris with the North Carolina Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I'm our Prevention Education Program Manager and one of the co-authors of Emergent Space, Finding an Alternative. Thinking back on how many things have changed and how many of them have seemed like heartbreakingly stay the same since we first wrote Emergent Space back in last summer, July and August in particular, and then in how many things have changed and how many things have stayed the same since last December when we kicked off this PreventConnect series. Really sitting with where does Emergent Space take us now with sexual violence prevention during COVID? Where are we now? And I think one of the things that's really important, a really important piece of Emergent Space as a framework when we're using it for prevention is the responsivity of it. Things are always changing, things are always shifting. And that's a good thing, right? That's a strength. We have this responsivity, we change, we look at the environment, we make sure we modify our strategies and our approaches. But at the same time, when we get really responsive, it can be hard to keep our center, especially when things are changing so quickly and so rapidly and in so many huge ways from 1 week to the next. I'm thinking about how quickly things went with Delta variant, for example, from being, this is looking a little scary to everybody shut it down. We have to be very careful, right? It moves so quickly, and that can make it hard to stay grounded through all of that. Because we want to watch what's happening, to keep aware of the needs in our communities and to keep aware of new evidence, new trends, new COVID necessitated practices and ways of being careful. But the fact is, we still have to have some part of us, some thread of our awareness that's always grounded and connected in our purpose, and staying like centered in the heart of what we're doing. What is the heart of this prevention? And that's what's been coming up for me a lot as I've tried to remain responsive and use these emergent space principles as someone doing prevention work, is the number of local people I'm hearing who are burnout and who are overwhelmed, and who are like, man, I could sustain this for a while. Like that first year I was in there, but I don't know that I can keep doing this. I'm feeling this overwhelm. And one of the things that I'm hearing from them too is this distinction between doing the prevention work you're doing out of desperation. I have to save my community. Everything is so big. What can I do? I have to just keep going and keep going and keep going all the time, versus, like trying to balance that with wanting to do what you're doing out of love, right? This isn't out of desperation. This is out of love. I love my community. I love myself. I love survivors. I love people who could be harmed. Like, how do we do this out of love without sliding so far into that desperation that we burn ourselves out in the fire of it? I know that we built emergent space on the concepts presented in Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. Another book I've read recently that really moved me and was powerful was I Hope We Choose Love by Kai-Cheng Tom. And I keep thinking about that as a preventionist. What does it mean to choose love? What does it mean for me as a training and technical assistance provider to choose love for the people I'm supporting at our local programs and our member agencies? What does it mean for me to choose love for our stakeholders? What does it mean for me as a community member or for my RPE subrecipients to choose love for their community when they're not always feeling like their community loves them back? How can they choose love? How can I support them in choosing love for a community that they really want to take care of and show up for and prevent sexual violence? And when that community can't be bothered to, I don't know, wear a mask to keep our preventionist or their children or their parents, their elderly and aging parents safe, what does that mean? Which brings me to really digging into what love is in the first place. Like, when is love tender? Can love be fierce? I believe it can. I'm a parent. I know I've felt fierce love on many occasions. But what does fierce love look like in practice? What makes it love instead of just fierce, right? What makes the fierce love still be love in the middle of that? And how do we keep from burning up in that fierceness? How do we keep from losing that softness? I don't know that I know the answers to these, but I know that as we continue this pandemic and continue looking at what COVID means and the continued ways in which we've failed to stop it when we had really wonderful opportunities to really make a difference. When I'm looking at all of this, I know that for me, the only way that I can stay sustainable in this work is to not get lost in the rage or in the desperation or in losing hope. I can't do that. I have to stay focused on the heart of why I'm doing this and on love. And so for me, that's where we are with what Emergent Space has brought me. It's brought me full circle through all of this responsivity, but back to the reminder that at the core of everything we're doing with sexual violence prevention is love. Hi, this is Chris with the North Carolina.
Wow. Shireen, Montia, and Chris from afar, thank you all so much for really, giving folks a great foundation to build and rebuild community in this time. I think it's an understatement to say that folks have felt an impact on their partnerships and relationships, whether it's in the work or in other facets of their life in this last year and a half. And for you to come back and recenter us on emergent strategy and emergent space is just, it's such a wonderful reminder and an amazing practice. And we're so grateful to have been able to have you back. So we really thank you for that. Mo has pasted the next question for our audience in the text chat about how can you sustain your partnerships and relationships to continue preventing sexual violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. As you all are responding to that, I want to invite my colleague Imelda and our final guest, Letty, to join us on the web conference. You may recognize Imelda and Letty from our fourth web conference in this series, Preventing Sexual Violence During COVID-19 in Latinx Communities. And we are keeping Pastor Benjamin Ortega in our thoughts today. He could not make it with us today, but he was part of that web conference as well. But we are so excited that we have Leticia Velez here and Imelda. Letty, take it away.
Thank you, Tori. Sexual violence prevention during the COVID-19 pandemic, adapting in an ever-changing landscape. The information provided by our community partners is based on the urgent need for the integration of prevention work in local faith-based communities in the janitorial industry to end sexual violence by providing outreach, education, and trainings to the underserved communities. With this information, our partners have also identified the challenges related to COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I would like to introduce today our guest, Leticia Velez, organizer of the Ya Basta program. Unfortunately, Pastor Benjamin Ortega from Fuente de Vida Ministries is not able to join today. Leticia Velez is joining our webinar Adapting in an Ever-Changing Landscape in July, and she is here with us to provide us a recap of the services provided in the janitorial industry related to prevention work and its efforts to end sexual violence in the workplace. Welcome, Letty, known as Letty, Leticia, or Little Letty.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Leticia Velez. My pronouns are she, her, hers, ella. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to just talk a little bit about what we do here at the Ya Basta Center. And our mission here at the Ya Basta Center is to educate and train our janitors about their labor rights in order to eliminate and prevent sexual harassment and abuse in the workplace. And if we can go to the next slide, we've been able to do this, to be in this fight for about 6 years now. It all started in 2015, and here we can see the timeline. It all started with a PBS documentary called Rape on the Night Shift, and we were just able to see how affected our janitors, our members are in the janitorial industry. You know, we were able to find out that a lot of them suffer from sexual abuse and rape. Unfortunately, a lot of these men and women work late shifts at night, you know, with the lights off, and, you know, they're just cleaning, they can't really see. And so they're very vulnerable to these sexual attacks. And because of everything that came to light, we were able to create the Ya Basta Center. And so it's been a couple of years of, you know, just lobbying and hunger strikes and you know, to be able to pass some law so that we could have something for our members, so that we could tell them like, hey, you have rights, and if something happened to you, we can do something about it. So we were able to pass 2 laws, and those 2 laws, the first one passed in 2016. That one would be AB 1978, and it was signed by Governor Brown. That one very beautifully lets us be able to go into the workplace, and the janitors themselves will be able to lead a sexual abuse training with their peers. And so it's very important that the janitors themselves capacitate themselves, so they are fully capacitated to do these trainings, and they themselves know better the industry, what they go through. And so who better to give these trainings than the janitors themselves, you know? And so it's so amazing. The other law that passed in 2018, and that one was signed by Governor Newsom. And that one just lets them know that, you know, how many hours they need to undertake for the training, but also these janitors will be paid for their hard labor. And so they'll be able to go into the workplace and get paid $30 an hour and just be part of a wonderful healing I'm sorry. English is my second language, since I forget it. But yes, it's been super nice to see these wonderful men and women just evolve and see them grow. If we can go to the next slide. As I said, our mission, you know, it's to eliminate and prevent sexual harassment in the janitorial industry. And so the next slide, we have a couple pictures here. This one, very beautiful, part of the many walks and that these amazing men and women have done. Our promotoras did a 100-mile walk from all the way to the Capitol. And so right here, you can see them walking on the San Francisco Bridge, the Golden Gate. And so, you know, you can ask them, they'll tell you like, we were super tired, but we were there, we were so pumped, we were so happy. And so every time you see them, they always light up, they always have amazing things to say. And so it's just so wonderful to work with them. And so, you know, I'm just gonna show you some pictures. If we can go to the next slide. Right here, we can see all of our janitors so far that have graduated under our curriculum. And so right here, we have 100 of our wonderful promotoras and compadres. And so, you know, these members underwent 80 hours of sexual abuse training in order to next year in June be able to go into the workplace and teach their co-workers, their peers about sexual abuse, and you know, examples what's not okay, you know, and their rights. And so it's super wonderful because thus far in this industry, they have never really had a sexual abuse training. So far, what they've had is basically just a pamphlet, and they sign a paperwork that just says like, oh yeah, I received my training. And neither the pamphlet nor the paperwork is in their native language. So they have no idea what they're reading. They have no idea what they just signed. And so all they have is this little pamphlet, and they're, you know, they'll come to you and they'll tell you like, what is this? I don't know what I just got. And so now they're going to be able to go into the workplace and give a 2-hour training with examples and videos and common questions. And so it's just going to be super wonderful to see, to know that our members are going to be able to know their rights more in depth than they currently know. And so, this picture is just super wonderful to know, like, all the people that have come so far. And, it started with a few women who broke their silence, who had a hunger stricken from the Capitol, so that, these wonderful laws could be passed. And now we have so many members here who are just so wonderful, and they love what they do, and they want to keep going. And it's just so wonderful to see their growth. If we can go to the next slide, please. And so one of the many actions that we've had just to show that sexual abuse and rape happens a lot in the janitorial industry, and it's something that it's very, very taboo to talk about, especially in our culture. A lot of our members are Spanish speakers, Latinos, and so it's a very taboo topic to talk about. And so, just to be able to go into their workplace and tell them all of their rights and the examples and everything that's happening, we'll be able to recognize members who have either been victims and survivors, or who are currently going through something, and be able to help them and let them know, like, hey, these are your rights. And, it's okay if you don't want to speak up, if you don't want to, do like sorry, my English, but you're entitled to other stuff. We have therapy. So in our center, we provide therapy sessions for those members who are who feel okay to do that. And for those who don't want to speak up or don't want to go to therapy, we have other options available too. We also do healing sessions. And so, thus far, everything has been virtual, and we've been able to have just amazing virtual healing sessions, as well as therapy sessions. So we do provide those here in our center. And I just want to highlight this amazing woman here in this picture. This is actually one of our lead trainers, Martha. She's so amazing. The way she has grown is so wonderful to see, but also the way she helps her peers and she encourages them. So, it's just so wonderful to see all these pictures, because, just to see how they started and now how much they've healed, and, so wonderful to see them. If we can go to the next picture, please. Okay, and so here we have a picture of a river. So I'm just going to tell you very quickly a story of that has a lot to do with what we do here. And so the story goes, there's a man in the river fishing, and then he sees a person just drowning and going along the river. So he stops what he's doing, he jumps in the river, and he rescues the person. And then he sees another person. So once again, he goes in, saves the person, and then he sees another person and another person and another person, and just a continuous stream of people drowning down the river. So the person, the guy who is fishing stops and thinks to himself, I am only one person. I cannot help all of these people. I am going to get tired at some point, and and unfortunately, I won't be able to help people. I drown, or I'll drown trying to help them. So he decides to go up the river and find out where all these people are coming from. What is the root, why people are in there to begin with. So once he gets up the river, he finds out that there is a bridge, and this bridge is broken. And so he sees that there's a crowd of people, and within the crowd of the people, they are fighting, and people are pushing. And so because of all the commotion that's happening, people are falling. And that is why he kept seeing all these people going down the river. So now that he's found the root, of like, well, where are these people coming from? Now he needs to figure out, okay, well, why are they fighting? Why is there all this commotion to begin with? But that is just a quick story that we like to say, that we'd like to tell our audience, to let them know that, why this prevention work that we do is so important, that we treat it at the root of the problem, and not just saving, we try to save as many people as possible, but if we don't get the root of the cause, then we're not going to get very far. And so that's why we love to tell this little story. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So here, I just wanted to show you guys how our trainings have been going so far, how we've been able to continue to keep our members updated and, just immerse in our training, so that when we're ready next year in June to go into the workplace, there are fully prepared. And so every day we have trainings where we go and we teach them how to communicate with the audience, how to answer questions, if there is someone who's just attacking and saying mean things, how to answer that and manage those kind of scenarios. And so here you can see just one of our little trainings where we were just going through one of our little exercises that we do, because during our training we have exercises just so that we can, us as trainers, but also for our members, they can read and they can just breathe a little, because we do talk about hard topics. And so this is one of those things. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and so this is just one of the many things that we've been able to do for our members. We were able to provide vaccines for them here at our union, and expedite the process and make it just super easy for them. And so this is just one of the many things that we've been able to help them through the pandemic. And we've also been able to do food pantries and food giveaways. But yeah, everything has been virtual, and so the few things that have been in person have been super amazing, and just making sure that they're always safe. And I'm not sure if that's the last slide. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Letty. That was amazing. You're amazing. Now, I'm going to make the $1 million question. How can you support your communities to continue preventing sexual violence during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Gosh, Imelda, that really is $1 million question. And I think so much of like what Letty shared of how Yabasta supported their community. I think that last picture showed it so well, of just being able to be flexible and meet your community's needs. That is a huge part of how we support our communities in preventing sexual violence. I also thought what Letty shared about, there's healing and therapy groups for the janitorial workers, and how she had shared that story of someone who had started there, and then now they are on the front lines of the community organizing and the prevention trainings too. I think so much of how we meet our community where they're at, like Enrica had said earlier in the text chat, and meeting our community's needs, whether that's material needs during COVID, like the food pantries and the testing that Letty had mentioned, or if it's needs for healings, like Letty had said a little bit earlier in her presentation. I think those are really important ways that people can support their communities to continue preventing sexual violence now during the pandemic and beyond. And I do recognize we're a few minutes over time, and maybe this is a question that folks just need to ponder a little bit more as they move about the rest of their day. But I do want to take a moment and thank everyone for being part of this grand finale of our web conference series. And want to give a special thank you to my co-host throughout this entire series, Mo Lewis. Also want to give a big thank you to Imelda Talamantes for joining us today, joining us on an earlier one. Thank you, Letty, again for joining us today and joining us on an earlier conference. Want to thank Montia and Shireen and Chris, as well as Janae. And I want to thank you, our audience, for being here for this journey, whether it was just for today or on the earlier web conferences. Mo, do you have anything to say before we close?
Oh gosh, just yeah, thanks all of you. This has really been amazing, and I just appreciate that we've been able to do this all together, kind of go on this journey. I hope we can do it again. Maybe under different
Yes.
circumstances.
Yeah, maybe next time it's how we prevent sexual violence now that COVID-19 is finally over. That's our hope. As Janae said earlier, wishing you all love and hope and encouragement. Thank you all so much for joining. This concludes today's web conference.